The Zelda series is cursed to go through cycles of evil sweeping over the fields of Hyrule. During these cycles, hordes of enemies conquer regions of Hyrule and terrorize the inhabitants. The Zelda series is home to many challenging and powerful monsters, each capable in their own right. If you guys could start off by giving the video a like and subscribing, I would appreciate it. Breath of the Wild is one of my favorite Zelda games and is filled to the brim with enemies, quests, and adventures to explore. There are many different kinds of enemies in Breath of the Wild, from common enemies like Moblins and Bokoblins to overworld bosses like Lynels and Hinox. Here are my top 10 Zelda enemies that should return in the sequel to Breath of the Wild. Beamos are living statues, often staring at you, waiting to get a perfect shot. Through their eye, they can shoot out lasers, which can do a lot of damage if Link isn't careful. A perfectly placed arrow or bomb usually does the job to destroy a Beamos whenever they're in your way. Often in the center of the room or behind walls, Beamos, I remember, are one of the most annoying enemies in the Zelda series. I would always get shot by their lasers no matter what I did. I think they would make a good returning enemy to Breath of the Wild too, because I feel that they could be used in an area like Hyrule Castle or underground areas that we see in the Breath of the Wild 2 trailer. Beamos have been one of the most common enemies since A Link to the Past in 1991. In this game, perhaps Link could use his shield similar to how he does with the Guardians and reflect back a laser beam, or even in this game they may have an ancient Beamos, and you can use ancient arrows to dispatch it in one shot. They could also be used as a form of ancient technology integrated into the Zonai ruins, but only time will tell. Poes are a recurring enemy in the Zelda series that I'm surprised hasn't made a return in Breath of the Wild. Their spirits, often found in graveyards and other dark places, that usually carry around a lantern that contains their soul. Poes are spirits of the dead that became monsters because of an unresolved attachment to the mortal world. As ghosts, Poes can disappear and reappear as part of their strategy and easily can move through walls. Due to this, Poes can often be a tricky enemy to attack, but usually a swift arrow can defeat them. I'm surprised Poes haven't made a return in Breath of the Wild, because I could see, with the Great Calamity happening 100 years ago, somewhere there could be a graveyard of fallen soldiers and perhaps of monsters, and in those graveyards the souls of monsters roam, wishing to get vengeance on their enemies that had slain them in the past. I could also see it being used in Breath of the Wild 2 for side quest elements, like collecting certain Poe souls like in Twilight Princess or Ocarina of Time, or perhaps trading them in to Kilton for special rewards. Wolfos is another enemy I'm surprised didn't make a return in Breath of the Wild. They're anthropomorphic wolf-like creatures that commonly appear in forest environments that emerge from the ground when they're approached, often sporting large fangs and large claws. One of the best means to attack the enemy is to use your shield and wait for them to attack. A way to quickly deal with them is to use your shield and then attack once it drops its guard. Wolfos, I'm surprised weren't in Breath of the Wild because of how many wolves are in Breath of the Wild, and they're constantly in packs waiting to attack you, similar to Wolfos in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. I feel like this one was really a missed opportunity here. Dekubabas are a plant-like creature that, when approached, will rise up and attack Link. They're often found in wooded areas and have a limited range of attack. I feel like they could have been used in Breath of the Wild in grasslands, or in areas like the Korok Forest, or in puzzles involving spikes found in various areas across Hyrule. I'm surprised an iconic enemy that's been around since Ocarina of Time hasn't reappeared in Breath of the Wild, and I think would make an amazing fit for Breath of the Wild 2. Gibdos are mummified corpses commonly appearing in graveyards and dungeons. They're one of the more resilient enemies in the Zelda series, and they're weak to certain weapons like the Fire Rod, or using certain techniques like Din's Fire. Gibdos have been around since Zelda 1, and they would have made an excellent enemy, an amazing fit in Breath of the Wild as enemies that come out during the night. Hopefully they return in Breath of the Wild 2 if they have dungeons, or if they make the nighttime more malicious than it already is. Iron Knuckles are iron warriors chosen by the King of Hyrule that often appear in places like Hyrule Castle or in dungeons as mini-bosses. Iron Knuckles fight with the sword and a shield, blocking attacks by stabbing the sword at their opponent, and are often one of the harder enemies to defeat. This is why I think they would make a good return in Breath of the Wild 2. I think they would make an amazing fit if Breath of the Wild 2 was much harder than the first game, since most people who have played Breath of the Wild will probably be playing Breath of the Wild 2. Arialfos was one of my favorite enemies from Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. They're lizard-like, flying, armored enemies that often attack with a sword and have a shield in their right arm. In Twilight Princess, Link has to use the claw shot to latch onto its shield and pull the Arialfos down to the ground so he can attack it with his sword. An enemy like this I think would be a great fit for the overworld and in dungeons of Breath of the Wild 2. I think it mixes things up a lot. Since we already have a lot of different variations of Lizalfos, I think that an Arialfos will make a really good addition to Breath of the Wild 2. Redeads are one of the scariest Zelda enemies in the entire series. They're corpses that often barely move, that wear wooden masks, that usually appear in small groups or sometimes alone in dead or ruinous places like tombs or dungeons. They often have a low-pitched shriek which paralyzes Link right before they jump on him. I think Redeads would make an amazing enemy in Breath of the Wild 2, especially in caves, since we know in Breath of the Wild 2, where they were originally exploring was a cave system, and underneath Hyrule Castle. I think they would make an amazing fit for a place like that, and hopefully we get to see them return in Breath of the Wild 2 as one of the tougher enemies. In the Wind Waker, Big Octos are a squid octopus-like enemy, often with many eyes, that can be found in the Great Sea. In the Wind Waker, Link can defeat them by using the hero's bow, boomerang, or with bombs. I think that they would make an amazing fit in Breath of the Wild 2 if they decide to expand the world and perhaps add maybe swimming or some kind of boat system of some kind so that they make the ocean navigable. And I think that enemies like Big Octos that you encounter in the sea would be an amazing fit to this new ocean system along with other enemies. Hopefully they add the sea system, and hopefully they add Big Octos back into this game. My favorite enemy in the Zelda series, and also the #1 enemy that I think should return to Breath of the Wild 2, is the Dark Nut. The Dark Nut is one of my favorite enemies because not many enemies give Link a run for his money. Darknuts are ironclad soldiers that can often stand toe-to-toe with Link and are usually sub or mini-bosses in Zelda game. To defeat a Darknut, you have to strip it of its layers of armor, and even then, in some games, it may fight you hand to hand. In Twilight Princess, Darknuts are one of the most powerful enemies in the game, and even is the final enemy that you face before you go up to face Ganon. I think Darknuts would make an amazing fit to Breath of the Wild 2, as perhaps a final enemy, or maybe an enemy that you encounter in Hyrule Castle. Darknuts are my favorite enemy in the Zelda series, and I would love to see them return in Breath of the Wild 2, as an extremely powerful enemy that you come across in the final hours of Breath of the Wild 2. Thanks for watching this video. Tell me, what did you guys think of the video, and do you agree with my pick? What enemies do you think will return, if any, in Breath of the Wild 2? I'd love to hear your comments in the comment section below. If you guys could leave a like and subscribe, I would greatly appreciate that, and I hope you guys check out other videos on the channel if you want to see more Zelda content like this. I've been Brosho, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.